My name is Brian Swenson. I'm the executive director for Haifa, and we have a special guest today. Named is Cynthia Cabrera. She is coming to us from Texas. She is going to jump on the call shortly and talk about a lot of the happenings of what Texas Hemp Business Council is up to, and what some of our litigation efforts are going to be. But before we dive into Cynthia, I want to introduce to you all my good friend, my fellow bald brother, Dwayne Carson.
Thank you, Brian. I may be bald, but I'm a little bit special. I'm just a little bit special. Now, I'm joking. Love you, Brian. And Cynthia, thank you so much for being on the call today, especially to talk with us about Texas. Love meeting you down in Vegas a couple months back. Guys, let me be very brief. We don't really have a ton going on the federal right now. Where we at right now is having conversations with members of Congress of what a regulatory package could look like. Where we are right now is talking to chairman and ranking member to see if we can get some sort of agreement of how that will be structured. But we also are right now is making sure that we're going to the parliamentarian and seeing what committees will have oversight of what portions of a regulatory package. The reason why we're doing all of that is to make sure that when, Brian has told you guys this before, when it's time to say, when he says go, when it's time to act, that we have checked every box. There's no hidden surprises. There's no chairman standing up and saying, but I've got this jurisdiction. As you guys can probably imagine, if you're dealing with any sort of regulatory perspective, you can bring in an appropriations bill, appropriations committee, you can bring in the ag committee, you can bring in energy and commerce. You can also bring in budget. I mean, there's so many jurisdictions. And of course, if you're going to tax it, you got to bring in ways and means. So that's six different chairmen right there. So that's what we're doing right now, having the conversations, going through it on the Hill. As you can guess, the House was out this week. So a lot of members were at home, but that was a perfect opportunity for us to talk to a lot of LDs and a lot of legislative assistants. There's still a huge learning curve. And so for a lot of you guys who have want to be surrogates, I will say Haifa will still be getting in touch with you guys because that's going to be very important back in their districts as they're speaking to constituents. And then, of course, on the Senate side, they're dealing with a DHS funding package that is now day 25, I think, into a shutdown. So now it's a messaging bill. So everything's kind of a little bit of a standstill as far as action goes in Congress, but that only means that Haifa and our allies are on the Hill trying to educate because, again, once we say go, it's time to go. With that, I'll turn it back over to Brian.
Yeah, thank you, Dwayne. Thank you. It's not, and just to give everyone an idea, because there's no news for everybody doesn't mean the ball hasn't been moved forward. We've had several several really good meetings throughout the week. Things are quietly moving behind the scenes, and just want everyone to understand that. And when we say it's go time, it'll be go time. But I think I want everyone to understand we are very much in a pretty good position. I feel positive that at some point over the next couple of months, we're going to see some kind of a regulatory package of some sort move. And I just want everyone to know, like, I truly do believe at the end of the day, the industry will be saved. We're going to be able to have a regulatory structure, in place. So I would say to everybody, don't give up hope at all, because I feel really, really positive. And the good news here too is because we're focusing on the battle on the federal side. We do work with a lot of our states and some of our friends in states. And my favorite state and one of my favorite people to work with wanted to bring on today Cynthia Cabrera to talk about some of the recent rules and some of the potential litigation efforts that we are going to be working on together. Cynthia?
Thank you for having me on, Brian. I appreciate you. I appreciate your time. Thank you for having me on. I mean, this is such a big thing, and Texas is like one dumpster fire after another between session and rulemaking and potential litigation, the existing litigation, that kind of thing. So right now, what we are, let me just backtrack for a second. There are a lot of folks that are desperate for something to happen immediately. And it's not like rules come out and then an hour later you're filing a lawsuit. That's not how it works. There were changes to the draft rules. So the final rules do not look like the draft rules. And the thing that I tell everybody about litigation, particularly in this case, is that I would rather be right than first. And it is so important to make sure that we get everything done and we get it done properly. I'll give you an example. I had a bunch of retailers contacting me on Wednesday night, and they were like, are we going to challenge these rules in court? And I was like, well, which ones specifically? Because there are labeling and packaging rules. I mean, which ones are we going to, which ones are you talking about? They're like, well, and I'm like, well, we can ask for a delay, but we're not going to say that we don't support child resistant packaging, for example. So there are nuances to a lawsuit. Some things are illegal. Some things we need a longer timeline to get implemented. And some things we just need to figure out whether it's worth the fight or not. There was the case in Florida recently with flour that didn't go well. There was a federal one also with flour that didn't go well. So more important than anything is making sure that flour is handled properly. And it is a big deal because it also affects distillate. So the definition between flour and distillate very similar. They have similar issues. The way this looks right now, we can't bring in flour, we can't bring in distillate. This is a problem, right? So that has to be handled well. But everything in the rules is not going to be challenged, right? And so the question is, what is it that most people don't like? What is clearly ultra vires, meaning illegal? And so it just takes a little time to put all of that together, which is what we're working on. Butler Snow, which is the law firm that we've been working with, the lead attorney, she had 2 trials, and she also, I don't know if everybody's aware or not, but the Supreme Court asked in the Sky Marketing case, the Supreme Court requested a brief on the universality of the injunction. So they had to put together a brief. The filing was the deadline for that was, I think, on Monday. So that had to get submitted. So there are all these different moving parts, and the existing lawsuit could potentially impact the new lawsuit and vice versa. So we're not going to hear, allegedly, we're not going to hear from the Supreme Court on the Sky Marketing case until June, but obviously things have to get done before that. And there have been a lot of ideas and theories about why don't you do it this way and why don't you do it that way? Well, everything has implications. So I've also had people asking me, why don't we just tell everybody what the strategy is? And I'm like, well, that's how you lose, right? So give your enemy the playbook and then just let them come after you. So people who are like, well, what exactly are you going to do? And can you make it super public? No, that's not going to happen. I mean, I'll talk to Brian and keep him in the loop and that kind of thing, but we are not going to have some portal where everybody knows exactly what's going to happen until the day that it's filed, and then everybody can read it. But there are a lot of strategies that we can pursue, and at the end of the day, we all want to win. The idea that somebody has to be first rather than filing a good lawsuit is so freaking asinine. I don't even know what to do with it. Even my dog is upset about it. Can you hear him growling? It's ridiculous. I have spent the entire week fielding calls from people about what are you doing? What's happening? Why haven't we filed it? Hey, take a minute, take a breather. Nothing that gets done in a hurry ever gets done well. And that is a fact. So I don't know if there are any questions or if anybody has specific, information that they're looking for.
Chat if you guys have any questions in particular for Cynthia and that are Texas specific. Would love to get some of those filed if anybody has questions related to Texas. But I do want to come over the top on what Cynthia said. Cynthia and the Texas Hemp folks over at Texas Hemp Business Council have been great partners over the last year. I've always enjoyed working with Cynthia. Sometimes she yells at me, sometimes she doesn't, sometimes she hugs me. I've always loved working with Cynthia. She's a straight shooter. I appreciate straight shooters. And quite frankly, I completely have faith and confidence in the plan and strategy that has been put in place for this litigation effort, which is why the folks over at Haifa are very comfortable coming on board and helping to split costs and do the things that are necessary to protect the entire industry in Texas. And they're doing a phenomenal job of it. So I want to thank you, Cynthia, for hopping on and giving everyone this update.
Brian, can I say something real quick?
Dwayne?
Can I say something just real quick? I just want to say, Cynthia,
Yep.
I'm going to speak for people in DC. If we would have taken her advice and said, don't be first, get it right, we would be in a different situation with Capitol Hill right now, right? You guys know you had members of Congress, Andy Harris and Mitch McConnell, who thought they were right. They didn't consult with the industry. They wanted to be first. They wanted to push things through. They didn't want to regulate it fairly. And look at the mess that we've been dealt, right? Even to where those members realize what they have done. So I agree with you so much, Cynthia. If you're going to do it, let's do it right. That way, people can't poke holes in your argument. That way, people won't be able to say, "Well, you're not 100% right." Right. So I just wanted to get that out there because that's super important. And I see people rushing to be first on Capitol Hill all the time.
And the other thing, Brian, to allude to, thank you, Dwayne. The other thing is, Brian, you mentioned something about continuing to fight, and just because people don't see it out front, they think nothing's happening, and that is not the case. There is so much happening, and there are so many different things in play. It's kind of like mind-boggling, really. And so we need to make sure that the original lawsuit doesn't get screwed over, and we have to make sure that this new lawsuit doesn't screw the existing one, and vice versa, and all of that good stuff. And so, but I do want to point out that now is not a good time. I mean, people can do whatever they want, right? We can't stop somebody from filing a crappy AI lawsuit, or somebody from, wanting to be the first or whatever, regardless of what the ramifications are for other people. We can't stop any of that, but I do want to say that the people who have been in this fight, like, don't give up now. This rulemaking thing and going through litigation potentially, and what it looks like, that is far easier than 2025 was. 2025 was a disaster. I mean, I think I aged like 10 years, and I would rather be going through a rulemaking thing than going through session again. So if we do this right and we get everything the way that we need it, it will influence the upcoming session. And so I just want to tell people, like, hang tight. I know it's like another hit and it's another thing to do, but that's the industry we're in. If you don't want controversy, sell lamps. This is not the industry for that. So I don't know if there's any questions or whatever. But.
Yeah. So let me dive into Cynthia. Can you just briefly just run down a couple of the quick new rules that are being implemented or have been asked to be implemented in Texas?
Yes. So for manufacturers, the new paperwork requirements are ridiculous. For anybody who's familiar with the tobacco industry has to keep what are called master files. And basically it's every ingredient. So tobacco, you can't make any changes to how a cigarette is made. So they're required to keep all this paperwork that is really like what they do to tobacco, but it doesn't apply, Mickey. It doesn't apply in this case. He's very protective. It doesn't apply in this case, but like manufacturers now have to keep so many records and so much paperwork. Same thing for retailers. Retailers are now on the hook for whatever they're selling. If it is misbranded or not properly labeled, the retailer is also on the hook now, not just the manufacturer or the distro. In the past, retailers could say, well, I got a COA that said it was accurate. They are going to be looking for retailers to do due diligence, to do random audits, to make sure that what they're carrying is compliant. There is, we did talk to Dishes, and they said that they would take into account good faith efforts on the part of the industry once the deadline hit. We'll see exactly what that looks like, but it is impossible for everybody to meet packaging deadlines. I'll also say that child resistant packaging is a big deal, and it is a requirement. You can meet it easily by going online and buying go on Uline or Google it or whatever, but you can buy clear, transparent child resistant packaging. It has to be resealable, has to be tamper evident and resealable, and that includes beverages. Retailers have a bunch of paperwork requirements also now. There is this ban on interstate commerce for anything over 0.3% Delta 9. They are implementing, so they're interpreting their language to mean total THC, but they don't use the word total THC everywhere. They've got 3 different definitions of THC, including THCA. So that's something else that can be challenged. Trying to think of what is, the fees. Manufacturers now are looking at a $10,000 a year fee. retailers are looking at a $5,000 a year fee. And I know that $5,000 is a lot for some retailers, but they also need to take into account what it's going to cost to do all these records and all this record keeping, because that's not free either, right? Somebody's got to do it. All the compliance applies to out of state brands and companies that are selling in Texas. So everything applies to them. If the state asks for, if they want the source approval, let me go back. Even if you're an out of state company, the state can request that you give them what compliance metrics or what regulations you used to formulate your products, to make your products. If you are bringing in products from a state that doesn't have a hemp program, that manufacturer is going to be on the hook to provide some kind of standard or some kind of something for what standards, what regulations they use to make those products. So I think Wisconsin doesn't have any regulations yet. Missouri doesn't have regulations yet. North Carolina doesn't have regulations yet. So they're all going to have to point to what they are using as the standard in case Dishes asks. Also, retailers can now be inspected by Dishes, TABC, DPS, which is the police pretty much. And I think there's one more, I just can't remember who it is. So now you're open, you're subject to inspections by multiple agencies. Also, if you are a TABC licensed business, meaning you're selling beverages there, you also have to have a Dishes license. So people who are selling to, for example, a bar, a small bar or a coffee bar or something like that, that has a TABC license, they also have to spend the $5K and get a Dishes license. So people need to be looking at their customers and who they're selling to make sure that they have both licenses now. I think those are kind of like the most egregious ones. Packaging has to change. Used to be that you could have a QR code on the back that took you to testing. Now you have to have a URL, like an actual old-timey URL that the customer has to type out to go view the COA. You can also have a QR code, but the customer or the consumer has to be able to get to that test result in less than 3 keystrokes. So it's a lot of stuff to keep track of. And then, of course, the total THC definition, the way that they're doing it. Anyway, so it's just a lot of different stuff. I don't know. Brian, are you gone? Do you want me to?
I'll read out a couple more questions for you, Cynthia,
Okay.
and then we'll go there. Let me scroll to the bottom. Give me 1 second, everybody. Thank you, Cynthia, for spearheading this industry pushback in Texas. Of course, funding for the lawsuit will be the #1 priority. But what else can we do in the public, customer-facing front to help with the mission to protect flower and keep Texas and the nation moving in the right direction on hemp?
One of the things that people can do, and I don't know if the person who's asking this question already does it, but compiling consumer data. So all your customers get their emails, get their addresses. One of the things, when we had to do a push was identifying where people were and being able to reach out to them. And there are a lot of companies that do not keep track of their customers. Oh, another big thing that has to be done in order to be compliant is you have to have a recall plan. Whether you're a retailer, whether you're a manufacturer, you have to have a recall plan in case there is a recall on some product. I don't think that's a bad idea, but it does require, and you can, for the record, you can get a recall plan template online, and then you just customize it to your business, but you just have to include that in your SOPs. So keeping customer data, keeping your customers informed, like have them sign up for the THBC newsletter so that they stay on top. And when there's something that they can do publicly, they get the information and they can do it. Or, commit to making sure that you keep your customers in Texas informed about what's going on, which would require that you also sign up to get those emails, or reach out to me or reach out to THBC and, ask whatever your question is or whatever. And we're happy to help.
Cynthia, real quick, you do have a question. The people want to see your dog. Multiple people do. But while you're doing that, the next question I have is, do out-of-state brands have to register in Texas?
Oh, he's put on a little weight since I rescued him.
That's a good thing.
Say hi, buddy. They don't have to register, is my understanding, but they do have to comply with Texas regulations. So the total THC, the labeling has to meet Texas And the thing about states is that they don't care if a manufacturer or a brand has to have, like, state specific packaging. They don't understand the need for uniformity or whatever. There are new warnings that have to go on the package. I mean, what we do at Hometown is, we try to make the warnings so that they meet as many of the state's requirements as possible without having to make state specific packaging. So we make them generic to try to meet all, check the boxes for every state. Yeah. Anyway, this is making.
Gotcha. One from Chris. Where are the acceptable levels for Texas full panel testing listed so that companies can be sure they are within appropriate levels?
Yeah, they're on the Dishes website. What I did notice in the comments that they put out, Dishes, was that they said that they were not changing the acceptable measurement of error. So they said that that's up to the labs to decide. So people need to be careful, which lab they're using. And for God's sake, use an ISO certified or something, or an equivalent type lab for your own safety. But the what you have to test for is on the Dishes website.
Got it. Got one from Mike here regarding Texas. Without disclosing legal strategy, is there a plan to seek a stay on these regulations prior to them going into effect on March 31st?
Yes, there is a plan to do that. Again, who could meet these labeling requirements in 2 weeks? Nobody. Even if you put out stickers, how are you going to get how are you going to get them printed? And they have to be like waterproof, so the lettering can't come off because the consumer has to be able to see what, like, who's going to be able to do that in 2 weeks? So we're working on something. We have communication going with Dishes to see about a grace period. So we'll see. There's no guarantees. And also it's not a surprise to anybody that agencies can do whatever they want, whenever they want, despite what's written down or whatever, but we're going to try to hold them to whatever we can. Perfect. And they did say that they would take into account good faith efforts so if you're like, look, man, I have a whole palette here of stickers, I'm just starting them, whatever, I think that should help.
Have another one from Chris. Is smokable flower on the forefront for Texas? It seems to be the most sold item in the state, along with flower pre-rolls.
Yeah, flower is like the #1 seller, and it is because of the way that they're interpreting this definition, it is at risk. And so I know that flower is a big revenue generator. I wish we could sell it at home. We don't sell it at Hometown because we have this other lawsuit with the state, and we've never wanted to risk that lawsuit by doing something that could get us in trouble, and then we're cooked, we're done, and then everybody's done because this injunction covers the entire state. So, but if we get a stay, because if we get an injunction and they slow down or they stop enforcement on flower, then obviously we can sell. But it will make it more black and white and give them time to align all these different definitions that are in the new rules.
Got it. And Cynthia, I'm going to give you a break and answer this next question. Are we still looking at an extension on the federal level, Wes, or only regulatory package at this point? Wes, that's a combination of both. So if you remember in January when you guys came up for the fly-in, we were talking about the extension. Congressman Baird introduced it with Ranking Member Angie Craig as a original co-sponsor. From your feedback, as well as the feedback from members, we heard that a lot of members supported the extension, but there was a good amount of members that were like, so if we're going to kick this can down the road, what does that mean? Is there any type of regulatory structure looking to be put in place? Are we checking or do we have ledge text that's available on the federal level? What does that look like? We had a lot of members, both Republican and Democrats, both House and Senate, that came back with that feedback. So what we did since that fly-in is really work on what a potential leg specs would look like, and what a regulatory bill would look like, and talking to the right committee chairs, the right ranking members, leadership in both the House and the Senate, Republican and Democrats, as well as the administration. I think it actually, if you keep going down the rabbit hole, and if a regulatory package is introduced, and let's say that it doesn't look like we have time to do the hearings and do the markups, and the Senate still hasn't passed any type of DHS funding for a bill, maybe you could see, I would hope that you all of a sudden a 2-year extension gains a little bit more momentum. So I think at the end of the day, we're looking to take, I'm not going to call it a straw man, but something that members may use to say we need to keep the laws that were passed by opening up the government in place because we don't have a regulatory structure. We take that talking point away. We do now. Now we need the time to be able to have the hearings, the markups, and everything else. And everything that I just said is exactly what Chairman Morgan Griffith has been saying to his colleagues. It's exactly what Rand Paul, of course, but you've also got Angie Craig, you've got Bennett. A lot of these members have been saying it to their colleagues. But I think a lot of these members who are on the fence or want more education, they want to see some sort of effort at a regulatory package. Hope I answered that, Wes. Cynthia, let me see if they got any more for you. Give me one moment. Okay, all about CBD Porter said, I'm a retailer and you mentioned that additional documenting on products. What does that entail?
Well, now you have to keep records of the COAs. You have to keep records of who your suppliers were. I think possibly you also have to keep chain of custody type documents. And I think you have to keep them. It's like 3 to 7 years or something like that.
Got it. Brett, he says, is there anything mentioned on the type of products that will be allowed to be registered and sold? Examples, compliant flour, dabs, syringes, etc.
So they don't talk about like syringes specifically, and it's not product specific either. The regulation, the way that they wrote it is as long as the product is below 0.3% Delta 9, and they're including THCA in the Delta 9 calculation. As long as it's below 0.3 Delta 9, it's compliant.
And Brandon says, and Brandon, I sympathize with you, especially as we're talking to members, we say the same thing. He says, I run my company by myself. I don't even have a second person to sign off on these. There's a lot of record requirements.
Yeah, it's a problem. I mean, and this is the thing. I remember years ago working with the FDA, and I was in a meeting and I pointed out how forcing vape manufacturers to go through the PMTA process was really burdensome for these businesses. And I remember the director of the Center for Tobacco Products said, we don't care about your businesses. And
Yeah.
I think that is something that we should all remember. They do not care about supporting the business.
Wow. Chuck writes, did any of this affect the farmer?
Well, it affects the farmer if the farmer is selling, for now, right? The way things are right now, without an injunction, without legal action or whatever, if a farmer is selling just flour, then yeah, it would affect who they're able to sell to, because technically people might not want to buy it. But if they're selling to processors and they're turning it into distillate in state, and just vertically integrated manufacturing is not affected, right? So
Right.
having distillate, if you're vertically integrated in Texas, is not going to be a problem. But the sale and distribution of what they call THCA flour above 0.3% Delta 9 would be problematic. So if you're a farmer and you're supplying processors, it's not going to harm you. If you're supplying flour and it's not compliant according to the state, it could be an issue.
Last question. Cynthia, from Randy. Hey, Randy. Cynthia, do we expect any new attempts by opponents of the industry, Ben, Patrick, etc., to come after the industry again in the next legislative session in 27? Or did the governor's veto effectively kill that in the legislature? Hence the attempt to circumvent the process by using DSHS.
Well, they didn't attempt to circumvent the governor issued an executive order and the veto, for which we're grateful. Dan Patrick has said absolutely he is going to ask for an interim study to show how horrible these are. And you can absolutely bet that 2027 is going to be another tough year. And for anybody who does business in Florida and has had to live under the threat of Trulieve, trying to legalize rec and take out the hemp space or whatever, Trulieve is one of the few companies that got a medical marijuana license in Texas last year when they expanded the program. So we're going to have to contend with that 800-pound gorilla too.
All right, we're sitting at 4:32. I always told you guys like to keep these around 30 minutes. Thank you very much for tuning in. Cynthia, thank you so much for jumping on, bringing a lot of clarity in Texas. We've got fights all around, state level, federal level. You guys have a great weekend. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.